On the 23rd of November in 1974, thousands of onlookers gathered in a small, unassuming street in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But why were they there? Hi folks, I'm Johnny and welcome to The Oddest. There is a haunted house in Bridgeport, Connecticut that doesn't get the attention the one in Amityville does. But in 1974, it caused a media stir that captivated the entire country, and nobody ever really talks about it. So why are all these people congregating in that street? Why were there multiple police officers, police vehicles, and fire department personnel in attendance? Simple. They all wanted to see what would later be described as the most haunted house in America. This isn't your typical ghost story. Instead, it's substantiated by more than 40 hours of interviews conducted with various individuals, including police officials, firemen, paramedics, and priests. The credibility of the witnesses is noteworthy, given their diverse backgrounds and reliability. These accounts paint a vivid picture of inexplicable occurrences, with witnesses describing furniture moving without any apparent cause, huge refrigerators hovering in mid-air, and televisions seemingly floating. The experiences ranged from unexplained noises to unsettling encounters involving physical attacks. In 1974, a multitude of individuals flocked to 966 Lindley Street, fueled by the anticipation of encountering a poltergeist, while others departed, seeking only to erase the haunting memories. This quaint three-room bungalow at 966 Lindley Street, constructed in 1923 for a shirt manufacturer, encompassed a cosy 738 square feet in a lower middle-class neighbourhood near St Vincent's Hospital. Its owners, Jerry and Laura Gooden, bought the property back in 1960. Jerry originally wanted to be a priest, but then, due to several factors including financial struggles due to the Great Depression, he instead opted for a trade. So he became an electrician. He dedicated 23 years of his career to Harvey Hubble, a manufacturer of electrical equipment there in Bridgeport. Laura was raised in a Native American household. She found it very difficult to make friends and therefore lived a fairly solitary childhood. This would have a lasting impact as she traversed life into adulthood. On Halloween of 1961, the Goodens welcomed a son, Gerard Gooden Jr. Unfortunately, a diagnosis of cerebral palsy followed a few years later. Despite their unwavering care, Gerard sadly passed away due to a fever at the tender age of 6. The Goodens, still grappling with the devastation of losing Gerard Jr., well, they decided to adopt a daughter less than a year later. They welcomed into their home young Marcia, a Native American girl who had endured previous abuse. Raising Gerard Jr. had made the Goodens exceptionally protective parents, especially given the challenges that Marcia faced. Marcia's difficulties in making friends and her propensity to play alone led to bullying at school, a situation that mirrored the childhood of her adoptive mother Laura. A physical bullying attack prompted the Goodens to withdraw her from the public school system, opting instead to educate her at home. Some observers point to the family's troubled background and traumatic loss as a potential catalyst for the unusual activity that would soon unfold. It all began with the unsettling sound of knocking. In 1972, the Goodens, distressed by the rhythmic pounding against the walls of their home, urgently reported their first encounter to the Bridgeport police. The Bridgeport lieutenant later verified their accounts, confirming the existence of a clear and rhythmic pattern to these knocks. What initially manifested during the night hours, well, also soon extended into the daylight time, intensifying the sense of distress. Seeking assistance, Jerry approached his neighbour and friend, who just happened to be a cop there in Bridgeport, Officer John Holsworth. In an effort to provide evidence for city officials, Holsworth suggested making tape recordings of this persistent noise. Guided by this idea, the Goodens traced the knocking throughout their home between the hours of 3 and 6 AM, discovering that the mysterious sounds seemed to span the entire length of the building. Over the following weeks and months, an exhaustive investigation took place. The fire department were called in to scrutinise the structure and the foundations of the house. Technicians inspected gas and plumbing lines, and law enforcement officials looked at potential neighbourhood suspects, including nearby kids, and there was a local construction crew. However, all leads were swiftly eliminated, leaving this mysterious knocking unexplained. As time passed, the knocking only got worse, and to the Goodins' dismay escalated in frequency and intensity. Alongside this auditory phenomenon, new and unsettling occurrences unfolded. The Goodins reported witnessing several spectral hands and unexplained footprints around their home. Windows would shatter and curtains were ripped from the curtain poles. All of these incidents seemed to coincide with the powerful knocking heard and felt throughout the house. They always knew when something terrifying was about to occur, when it was precluded by ever-increasing rapping on the walls and the floor. Unfortunately for the family, well, the worst was yet to come. The events of November 23rd, 1974 unfolded after Jerry and Laura returned from the grocery store. Upon entering the house, Jerry went upstairs to check on Marcia and found her peacefully asleep in her bedroom. But he noticed something strange. See, the television had been removed from its place on top of a chest of drawers and was now front side down on the kid's bed. Jerry returned the TV to its proper position and rejoined Laura in the kitchen as they started to put away the groceries together. It was then that they heard a smashing sound. It was simply just a plate that had came off the countertop. Maybe it was nudged by one of them, a mishap that's common in most kitchens. But then it happened again. To the pair's astonishment, several dishes began to levitate a short height from the worktop and drying board, only to be thrown with an unseen force against the walls and the floor. As Jerry attempted to investigate the sink area, knives unexpectedly sprang from the knife rack, narrowly missing him. In a bizarre sequence of events, the knife rack itself tore free from the wall, with the screws tearing loose from their mounting. Even the refrigerator, weighing over 300 pounds, defied gravity as it floated and rotated in mid-air. The unsettling incidents continued with a nearby Zenith tube television. You know, one of those old school TVs that's contained within a mahogany cabinet? Well, that had toppled over, crushing two of Laura's toes in the process. Despite the unsettling occurrences, Jerry and Laura initially tried to remain in denial, turning off the lights in the kitchen and then quietly eating dinner in the living room. Throughout that night, the kitchen table and chairs repeatedly toppled over, with Jerry quietly straightening things each time. The disturbances persisted, with curtain rods falling from almost every room, and the ominous knocking resumed, keeping them alert and fearful until the early hours of the morning. Jerry woke up the next morning to find the kitchen furniture in disarray. Several times the night before this would happen, and each time Jerry would calmly go back into the kitchen and put everything back in its place. So it was really no surprise when he found the kitchen in that state in the morning. Even stranger than that, the massive refrigerator had been moved again, clear across the kitchen, and was now blocking the door. He would fix things downstairs, then head straight back to the bedroom to tell his wife of the overnight happenings. However, before he could even open his mouth to say a word, a crucifix and a photograph of Jesus on their bedroom wall flung themselves... Not a photograph of Jesus. Who took that photo? However, before he could say anything, a crucifix and picture on a bedroom wall flung themselves to the floor, as if a pair of invisible hands had just ripped them away. Before they could react, a loud bang sounded throughout the house, appearing to come from Marcia's bedroom. When the two distressed parents got up and entered the girl's room, they were shocked to see the large wooden dresser had seemingly been tipped forward onto the floor. More concerning though, was that the heavy piece of furniture, well, it was only a short distance away from where Marcia had actually been sleeping. Once more, before the family could fully react to this and what was going on, they heard further crashing sounds, this time coming from the living room. When they made their way downstairs, they discovered that all three heavy chairs were moving of their own accord, both back and forth off the floor and back again. Even stranger than that, the sound of a doorbell was seemingly coming from the television. It was obvious to the family that things were not going to get any better. In fact, they were rapidly getting much worse. It was then that they decided to contact their neighbours Harold and Mary Hoffman because, well, they were desperate for help. While awaiting the arrival of Harold Hoffman, the Goodins ventured outside to wait on the porch of the house. However, as they stood on the porch, Laura suddenly let out a scream. Jerry turned to see what was going on and saw, along with Laura and Marcia, the sofa on the porch was hovering around 4 feet up into the air. It remained there for several moments before it came crashing back down to the floor. Also witnessing these events was the daughter of Officer Holsworth. Jerry immediately asked her to go and get her father, as they were in trouble here. She did so immediately. As soon as he arrived, Jerry turned to him and said, "There's some kind of evil force inside wrecking our home." Officer Holsworth went inside the home, and as he walked around it, was apparent that the place was in utter carnage. Crucifixes and pictures were strewn across the floor. As he entered the living room, he jumped back as the heavy recliner chair in the living room levitated several inches off the floor and moved a short distance across the room. As he re-entered the hallway and looked out towards the terrified Goodins, he opened his mouth and pointed at the living room to tell them about what had just happened, when a metal screeching noise got his attention. He quickly spun around to face the noise coming from the kitchen. He clearly saw the heavy fridge moving again of its own accord, and for Officer Holsworth, well, that was enough. Something was going on here and he needed more eyes on it, so he rejoined everyone on the porch and called for police backup. Around 10 AM that Sunday morning, Officer Carol Leonzi and Officer Joe Tomic pulled up to the Goodins' property. As they surveyed the chaos inside, their initial impression was a possible burglary. However, when Tomic saw the television hovering in midair, well, it became evident that this was no ordinary situation. Not long after Leonzi and Tomic's arrival, two more officers, George Wilson and Leroy Lawson, showed up, responding to Mary Hoffman's initial call. As the officers exchanged information about the strange happenings, they collectively witnessed the refrigerator again lifting into the air before gently settling back down on the floor. Despite lingering skepticism among the officers, a sense of the paranormal started to creep in, leaving them wondering if they had stumbled upon something otherworldly. If there was any lingering doubt about the authenticity of these bizarre events unfolding inside the Goodin home, the next couple of hours would erase that entirely. While Officer Tomic was in the middle of documenting this incident, a sudden loud crash echoed from Marcia's empty bedroom. Rushing there to investigate, the officers found heavy-duty drawers tipped forward again. Before they could process this, a wooden cross on the wall began to swing like a pendulum. It then flew off the nail, seemingly torn away by invisible hands, and it struck Officer Lawson directly in the chest. Startled by this, he promptly left the property and adamantly refused to ever return. Amid the ongoing strange occurrences, the police, prompted by the surreal nature of these events, decided to call in
Ghostbusters!
No, I'm just kidding. They called in the fire department. Among the responders was firefighter Jack Messina. During this time inside the property, even he observed the TV seemingly lowering itself to the floor gently without any apparent cause. With the house now bustling with people who were all witnessing these peculiar incidents, one of the firefighters reached out to Father Doyle, a local priest. They informed him about the poltergeist-like activity and requested his presence at the scene. The arrival of Father Doyle seemed to validate their fears. After a brief survey of the home and hearing about the unsettling events, he solemnly told the family, "There is an evil spirit in this place." Yeah, no shit. Without delay, Father Doyle initiated a blessing on the property. What unfolded next sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. As Father Doyle prepared for the blessing, arranging his rosary beads, holy water and a small Bible, he positioned his holy water on a nearby table. When he reached for his Bible, an eerie event unfolded. See, the holy water that he had put down had tipped over, just out of his grasp. Undeterred though, Father Doyle reset the holy water and made another attempt, only for it to tip over once more before he could even touch it. Frustrated but undaunted, Father Doyle uttered a prayer and made a crucial decision to seek assistance from a fellow priest experienced in exorcisms. Meanwhile, the house remained packed with people, including a paramedic who had been called in after the police requested a check on Laura's foot. Jerry's brother Edmund was also present. One of the most perplexing and genuinely unsettling occurrences involved alleged voices emanating from the family's cat. According to Edmund, he overheard one of the police officers saying, "It's coming from the cat. I heard it say bye-bye." Intrigued and somewhat disturbed, the officer went outside to speak with his duty supervisor. While Edmund couldn't catch the entire conversation, he overheard that the officer adamantly refused to re-enter the property. In the aftermath of the intense morning activity, Edmund suggested that he take Marcia out for lunch to provide a temporary escape from this eerie environment. However, the strange incidents showed no signs of letting up. Among the individuals who entered the house that morning was Mary Pasquarella, a neighbour and member of the Psychic Research Centre. Struck by the peculiar events unfolding, she eventually reached out to paranormal researchers Ed and Lorraine Warren, informing them about the bizarre happenings at the small Lindley Street house.
I never seen so many police vehicles, fire department vehicles, people all surrounding it, like it was a crime area.
Onto Lindley Street. I seen numerous police and fire department vehicles, already a crowd of probably 200 people. I went in the house and here were police officers, firemen, the Gooden family, neighbors, and it looked like somebody went through the house with a baseball bat.
Ed Warren would arrive first, introducing himself to Jerry Gooden. Though Jerry was unfamiliar with the Warrens, he recognised the need for assistance from someone experienced in dealing with such mysterious matters. He agreed to let Ed in. Jerry participated in interviews about the morning's events with the police and others present in the house. Ed then left the property, promising to return with his wife and Father Charbonneau. They would also bring along a young seminary student called Paul Eno. He had held a keen interest in the paranormal. When they all got back to the property, it seemed like there was more activity going on outside. See, police were coming in and out of the house and a small crowd of onlookers was starting to form. Once inside, Ed had pulled Paul Eno aside and advised him to stick close to Marcia. He explained to him that in hoax cases, children are often involved and they can also play a genuine role in paranormal situations. This advice would turn out to be quite accurate, at least in part. Later that afternoon, the young girl found herself in the midst of another strange occurrence, one that had multiple witnesses once again. While young Marcia was chatting with the police officers, the chair that she was sitting on suddenly lifted up into the air. It hovered there for a few moments before completely flipping, causing Marcia to tumble to the ground along with the chair. Interestingly though, when the officers tried to put the chair back, it took the combined effort of two of them because the chair was so heavy. The series of strange events persisted throughout that day. As the Warrens carried on with their investigation, the police reached out to electric companies and plumbing inspectors to figure out the cause of these strange occurrences. Unfortunately, they couldn't find any explanations. By mid-afternoon, with the bizarre activity seemingly halted for a bit, the police decided to leave the property. They couldn't provide any explanation for the truly peculiar incidents that they had witnessed. They advised the family to report any further activity, but realistically, there seemed to be very little they could do. However, within a few hours, not only did the strange activity resume, but the family also found themselves facing another challenge. Adding to the complexity of the situation were the expanding crowds outside the Goodens' home, which had swelled at this point to over 2,000 people by 4 p.m. What's more, a significant portion of the crowd consisted of reporters from radio and television stations. However, none of the reporters were given permission to enter the property or even have a conversation with the Gooden family. As the Warrens, Father Charbonneau and Paul Eno left the premises, they did so under the watchful eyes of the masses gathered outside the small home. Understandably, with no official information being sparse, rumours and speculative chatter about what was actually happening inside that house circulated throughout this crowd. In just a day, the Goodens' home became the most popular attraction in the state, and soon, the country. Later in the afternoon, the police made a return when the activity resumed. Eventually, they set up a barrier to control the continuously expanding crowd outside the house. Occasionally, individuals in the crowd even reported witnessing statues outside the property moving on their own, with some claiming to hear an eerie demonic-like voice uttering unheard words from the house itself. The peculiar occurrences, such as household objects moving and furniture tipping over, along with mysterious booming noises, persisted well into the night. Despite the unsettling events, the Goodens did their best just to brush it off and try and carry on. When the Warrens and Father Charbonneau and Paul Eno returned to the property, the crowds outside persisted, and reporters from beyond the local area had now joined in. While most of them were being ignored, a few managed to gather bits of information from police officers as they entered or exited the house, along with brief words from some members of the Gooden family. These fragments of information slowly pieced together a basic picture for their viewers and listeners, attracting even more attention. The investigators walked into a scene of absolute chaos. Ed Warren had advised the family to leave everything as it was, so they could witness the extent of what actually happened, a suggestion that they followed. As the investigators spoke with and interviewed the family, the strange events continued to unfold around them. This included curtain rails falling down and even all the lights in the house going out for several minutes at a time. However, perhaps the most peculiar incident unfolded about an hour after the investigators' arrival, which was a little after 9 AM. While the family and the investigators were gathered around the kitchen table discussing the day's events, Paul Eno noticed a strange burn mark was developing on Lorraine Warren's arm, right before his very eyes. Around the same time, Paul also detected a smell of sulphur. This detail is intriguing, as it not only surfaces in other paranormal accounts, but also in accounts of UFO and close contact alien encounters. When Paul Eno and Lorraine Warren later discussed the day's occurrences back at the Warrens' home, they suddenly sensed a presence was with them, almost as if something had followed them from the Goodins' home. These unusual events persisted into the following morning and afternoon, prompting the investigators to discuss the possibility of organising an exorcism for the house. One of the strangest incidents occurred while Paul Eno rested his hand on a kitchen chair where Marcia had been sitting. Suddenly he felt the chair lifting up into the air, seemingly pushing against the pressure of his own hand. Instinctively though, Paul pushed back down on the chair, and he was astonished when, whatever force was pushing it up, abruptly abandoned its attempt to lift the chair altogether. While the family and investigators played a wee game of Monopoly during a quiet spell, an unusual force began to be felt by everyone in that room. It seemed like something was about to reveal itself. According to those present, whatever it was resembled a large, cohesive assemblage of smoky, yellowish, white mist. Although somewhat transparent, the outline of 4 bodies, essentially 4 entities, was visible to everyone present in that room. Adding to the eerie atmosphere, this sulphur-like smell had returned, accompanied by a constant hum, audible to everyone present. A particularly strange turn of events unfolded when Jerry suddenly began chanting a prayer in fluent Latin, and he did so in a voice that clearly wasn't his own. In response, the mysterious figures started moving around the room, as if in an organised pack, and it followed Jerry from room to room. When one of these entities approached the young girl, Eno positioned himself in front of Marcia to protect her and block its path. However, the situation took an even stranger turn when Eno distinctively felt the entity push against him, allowing him to sense the physical presence of this apparition. He would later describe this entity form as bird-like.
Before the actual, what I call the attack, Gooden was in the kitchen chanting in Latin. I felt there were 4 entities here. You could almost see gauzy structures, and the reason, because Gooden came back in here, 4 of these things, I felt, came out of Marcy's room. That seemed to be, if you want to use the classic term, the portal. And these weird-looking things, that's what they felt like when I physically tangled with one.
Despite Eno's efforts, the entity managed to maneuver around him, and suddenly Marcia was lifted up into the air and then thrown back to the floor. Uncertain about what to do, but sensing the need to leave, Eno urged everyone to step outside of the property, which they all promptly did. As they exited, the growing crowd witnessed these unfolding events. Despite the commotion emanating from inside the house, Eno insisted that the family stay outside while he then contacted the Warrens. When the Warrens showed back up, the weird and unsettling events were still going strong. This time around, 2 folks from the local WNAB radio station managed to talk to the Goodins into letting them into the property. Once they were inside, they saw it all. Furniture moving on its own, TVs toppling over, and eerie noises echoing throughout the place. It was like stepping onto the set of a horror movie for them. But what really had the police on edge was the crowd that had gathered and the ongoing need for a police presence to keep them all in check. The cops realised that they had to do something to disperse the crowds, and that just wouldn't happen as long as people thought that there was something seriously strange happening there. So, the Warrens and Paul Eno wrapped up their time at the Gooden house, thinking they'd be back the next day to dig deeper into these weird happenings and figure out how to tackle this bizarre activity. Little did they know that a major twist was about to unfold, and it wasn't anything they could ever have predicted. On the evening of November 25th, as the police officers were changing shifts heading into the 26th, a turning point was on the horizon. While the officers were going about their duties in the home, Marcia pulled a familiar stunt, pretending the recliner chair that she was sitting in suddenly flung itself back, a trick that she had played in previous days. Laura once again scolded her for this and told her to stop fooling around. Little did they know that Officer Costello was about to witness something that would shift the entire course of this case. As the adults chatted, Officer Costello saw Marcia subtly stretch her leg and nudge the television, causing it to make contact with Jerry. Caught in the act, Marcia quickly realised that Costello had seen her. Without wasting any time, Costello informed the other officers present. Soon after that, as Officer Del Toro recounts, Marcia confessed to orchestrating the bizarre happenings at the house. Looking back, it seemed that Marcia initially admitted to only a few recent incidents, but the situation quickly escalated, possibly with a nudge from the police, leading them to conclude that the entire case was nothing but a hoax. They wasted no time making their decision public, a move that conveniently helped disperse the crowd outside of the house. The police also suggested counselling for Marcia, a recommendation her parents did actually agree to. Meanwhile, various theories circulated, suggesting that the Warrens might have somehow contributed to the events after getting involved. Eventually, the Goodins, who were not suspected of being part of this hoax, decided to cut ties with the Warrens completely. The primary reason for this break was Marcia's apparent confession, particularly her claim that she had witnessed Lorraine Warren intentionally scalding herself under the hot water tap to create this burn mark. Another factor was the revelation that Ed Warren had used their phone to contact the press, alerting them to the strange occurrences. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, to be honest. Later interviews conducted with some police officers revealed that despite knowing that something unusual was happening there, the police aimed to present this as a mere hoax to discourage crowds from gathering, and perhaps indirectly to shift the focus and pressure away from the family. The Warrens and Paul Eno got wind of this supposed confession, and the suspicions that they might have played a part in encouraging this hoax through radio reports the next morning. According to that radio broadcast, Marcia admitted to being the one who had done the banging on the walls and on the floor that started it all. The report claimed that she was behind the moving furniture, the crashing household items, and even the strange voices, demonstrating how she achieved it all. Ed promptly called the Goodin home upon hearing this news, but was met with the information that the family no longer wanted their assistance. Paul Eno drove to the property, only to be told to leave and don't come back. Like everyone else involved, they were all aware that what they had witnessed wasn't the result of a hoax, especially not one orchestrated by a 10-year-old girl. Despite some officers expressing doubt, the police department issued a statement officially labelling this incident as a hoax and boldly declared, "There are no ghosts in Bridgeport." Individual officers went on record with statements to the media, reinforcing the notion, at least in the eyes of the wider public, that the events were simply not genuine. However, not all officers were on board with the hoax theory. See, Officer Tomek, for instance, well, he admitted to witnessing some bizarre things, but he just couldn't explain them. He expressed doubt that the Goodins could have caused the unexplained movements, noting that they typically weren't even near the items that seemed to move on their own. Another officer emphasised that it wasn't just one or two things moving, it was many different things happening all at once. Despite these dissenting voices, the police considered the case closed and withdrew their presence, leaving only small units for several weeks to manage the lingering crowd outside. Despite the police closing the case, a reduced but persistent crowd remained outside the Goodin home for several days. Inside, even though the Goodins entertained the belief that their daughter may have played a role in the strange incidents, the bizarre happenings still continued, albeit less frequently than during the intense weekend activity. Adding to their concerns, a new threat emerged. Returning home after a Thanksgiving meal and settling in for the night, Jerry detected the smell of smoke. Alongside a police officer stationed outside, they discovered a small fire at the back of the property. Clearly intentionally started. Although quickly extinguished, it was a stark confirmation for the family that they were now vulnerable to threats from both inside the house and outside. 3 individuals were subsequently arrested and charged with the arson attack, providing some relief for the Goodins. However, it became evident that they were now not only contending with strange forces within their house, but also facing external dangers as well. In the ensuing days, much to the Goodins' relief, these strange events inside their family home seemed to be waning. By the time December had arrived, it appeared that they had stopped altogether. However, after little over a week, with no unusual activity, things suddenly took a turn. The unsettling activity resumed on the evening of December 10th, 1974, mirroring the previous occurrences. Furniture moved on its own, the television toppled over, and various household items seemingly hurled themselves from shelves and walls. In the days that followed, the family tried their absolute best to continue with their lives, but the intensity of the activity seemed to escalate daily. Any lingering belief that it was Marcia that was responsible for these events was completely dispelled. Not only did her parents witness the occurrences firsthand, but police officers stationed outside the home also saw these things unfold. Whenever the family left their home, they returned to find it in complete disarray, as if someone had ransacked it. Even the recently acquired dog sensed something strange in the house, routinely pacing and barking at invisible presence. Desperate for a solution, the Goodins turned back to Father Doyle, hoping to secure authorization for an exorcism from the church. Father Doyle assured them that he was working on making that happen. Distraught over the prolonged and chilling activity in their home, the Goodins felt lost, unsure where to turn for help. Then, just under a week after the incidents had resumed, a ray of hope emerged. See, on December 16th, Jerry answered a phone call that would change the course of their struggle. The caller introduced himself as Boyce Beatty, an apparent poltergeist investigator affiliated with the American Society for Psychical Research. He claimed that he might be able to assist the family. What caught the Goodins' attention, and likely why they agreed to work with him, was his commitment to keeping the investigation completely private and away from the media spotlight. They agreed to meet at the house 2 days later on December 18th. In the meantime, the unsettling activity did continue, showing signs of increasing in both strength and intention. True to his promise, this Boyce Beatty, accompanied by investigators from the Psychical Research Foundation, Blue Harari and Jerry Solvin, arrived at the Goodin house on December 18th. Unbeknownst to the family, the team had previously met with Ed Warren, who, despite his disappointment in how his involvement had concluded, well, he provided them with a comprehensive briefing on everything that he knew about the case. The team also managed to get insights from the police department, which surprisingly was willing to assist in this investigation, albeit discreetly. This arrangement suited Beatty, who was keen to operate away from media onlookers. The investigation unfolded throughout the month of December and witnessed as much, if not more, paranormal activity than what the Warrens and Paul Eno had experienced. While they believed they were witnessing genuine paranormal events, the team also suspected that the Goodins' overbearing parenting style, particularly towards Marcia, contributed to her genuine unhappiness. Beatty concluded that this parenting style, coupled with the overall family discontent, had created a pathological environment that ultimately set the stage for poltergeist disturbances. This observation is intriguing, as many poltergeist cases involve a young child as both the focal point and potentially the source of this phenomenon. Some theories suggest that such negative energy not only sustains ghostly apparitions, but may also attract them. Beatty also observed a pattern where events seemed to unfold following a psychological change introduced into the home. This occurred when someone new entered the house or a particular room, including the constant flow of police investigators. In essence, the more people that the Goodins brought into their house to address these incidents, the worse it all seemed to become. In his conclusion, Beatty affirmed that the happenings at Lindley Street constituted a genuine poltergeist case with authentic paranormal psychokinetic effects. However, he also acknowledged that at least some of these events were solely attributable to Marcia.
Things were happening, huge television sets flipping over, and one time, a policeman who was there saw the little girl who was the poltergeist agent use her foot for a television lying on his face and twist it, and it spun around. He told his lieutenant, and they publicized on the radio and television that this is all a fraud. The girl it's a hoax by the little girl. And they did that in order to get rid of all of these 2,000 people gathered around the house with traffic backed up to the throughway and so forth, and they dismiss it.
The incidents began to subside as 1975 unfolded, and although the Goodins tried to sell their home with the intention of moving away, they ultimately stayed there for the remainder of their lives. In the aftermath, Marcia seemingly faded into anonymity. Laura Goodin, however, met a tragic end in a traffic accident in June of 1993. Jerry continued to live in the family home after his wife's passing and eventually passed away himself from natural causes in September of 1997. It is noted that Marcia at some point after 1980 returned to Canada. Later, revelations disclosed that she passed away from natural causes at the age of 51 in February of 2015 at Ohio Med Central Shelby Hospital. The investigation into the Lindley Street case was initially handled by the seasoned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Back then, in the mid-70s, the couple were already well respected in their field. However, a lot of accusations surfaced, suggesting that they might have exaggerated certain events to boost their own fame and fortune. I've covered this before in other videos about the Warrens. I mean, interestingly though, despite these claims, the Warrens didn't charge the Goodins or any other families they assisted a single dollar. Their income came from their written works and public speaking engagements. An intriguing point to note is that similar accusations emerged a decade and a half later during the Snedeker haunting in Connecticut in 1986. Some argued that the Warrens were more interested in promoting sensational aspects than in genuinely unravelling these hauntings. The suggestion that Ed Warren allegedly said, "Just use what works and make up the rest," well, that added fuel to the controversy. Regardless of the accusations, the Warrens remained respected paranormal investigators. The fallout from the Lindley Street case may have unfairly tarnished their reputation, considering their genuine contributions to the field. Moving on to the author of The World's Most Haunted House, William Hall, well, he delved into the research of this case. Through interviews and statements from those involved, a more comprehensive picture emerged. Officer Tomek expressed serious doubts about the family causing all of the incidents, emphasising the need for the truth to come out. Officer George Wilson believed that while the young girl may have gotten carried away, many incidents were absolutely beyond her control. Assistant Chief William Parks echoed his sentiment, pointing out the challenges that a small girl would face in moving things unnoticed with so many people present. Fire Chief Jack Messina, an eyewitness to the initial activity, staunchly rejected the notion that the girl could orchestrate this hoax. That's it for this video, folks. I don't know about you, but I feel it's time for a wee cup of tea. So what's your thoughts on this case? Surely with the sheer amount of incidents that took place in direct view of several witnesses, and I mean, let's forget about the Warrens and the other folk with certain biases towards it actually being a poltergeist haunting. But what about all the cops, the firemen and the paramedics? I mean, if it was truly a hoax, surely that would be a tough one to keep up for extended periods of time. Anyway, listen, I hope to see you all in the next video. You guys take care of yourselves. Tell someone that you love them, and remember, no matter what, keep smiling.